Chapter 7, County Planning. Albert Scace walked into the neat, modern county administration building. It had taken him only 25 minutes to drive down from Warkworth on a beautiful summer morning with clear skies. Last night's fog had cleared early, and the countryside was at its best. As he drove the last few miles, he noticed the strip development along the highway. It was not like other such developments, with garish gas stations and cheaply constructed hot dog and hamburger stands. Rather, there were more and more pleasant residential houses springing up along the way. The old village of Baltimore, with its disused cheese factory, the antique stores, and typical rural Ontario variety lunch, was hardly noticeable among the new suburban houses in various stages of construction. Or the older settled, tree-girded houses on the Hog's Back, just above the McDonald-Carshi freeway. He wondered what was in store for Percy Township if Own Your Own Ontario had its way. The County Conservation Authority outer office had great maps on its walls showing various geographical features. Just outside his own cubicle, a set of drawings and plans set out the advantages and disadvantages of the proposed Hope Township landfill project. The railroad was proposing a huge landfill operation to bury metropolitan Toronto's unmanageable garbage after it had been trucked there in boxcars. Conservationists were mostly on the one side in that argument, but there was the other side, with compelling arguments and probably government on its side. Again, he thought how a scheme like that would affect his beautiful Northumberland hills. Fortunately, the railroad had no convenient spur line close to his countryside, but earth movers could make enough mess without one bag of city garbage thrown in. Albert took his jacket and settled down to his desk. There would be the Hartford Marina scheme, and there were some plans to increase the number and strength of the river groins along the Trent near Healy Falls. Then he noticed a scribbled note on his desk. Bert, it read, Skip wants to see you as soon as you come in. Skip was his boss, the county manager. He wondered what the problem was today. Skip was not always friendly towards the activities of the Conservation Authority, but it was a legally constituted board with clear powers set out in an act of provincial parliament. So the real problems that arose with Skip were not of basic policy, but of the application of issues connected with the availability of trucks, equipment, or labour from county roads. Albert stuck his head in the secretary's off door. "Someone wants to see me?" he inquired. "Someone does," replied Marianita. In spite of her romantic name, derived from her mother's love of romantic novels, Miss Marianita Biggs was in most respects a typical rural Ontario lady of uncertain age. She retained the farm girl's sense of humour, and also the swept-back, short hairdo that seemed to go with a square face, short body, and blue eyes in the part she came from. "Go on in." Skip Martin was sitting behind his desk, his feet up on it, looking soberly into the middle distance through his big window. With a flash of hostility, Albert thought of President Nixon, listening to the reruns of Watergate tapes. Martin's eyes slowly came into focus and swung over to the red-headed engineer. "Morning, Bert," he said. "How are things in Warkworth?" "I've seen more of Hartford than Warkworth lately, unless you're talking of things at home. Things at home are just fine. What's up?" "Trouble from Toronto." Skip Martin didn't know what scorn some people poured into this pronunciation of the name of Toronto, the Queen City, also known to some as Hogtown. "Been complaints about your interfering with commercial enterprise in the real estate business." "You're kidding." "No, seems that Mr. Hugison was a big shot with the Nautilus Corporation, and he's been complaining to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. Says one of Nautilus' subsidiaries is trying to buy up land in your area, and that the local representative of the Conservation Authority is impeding progress. Is that so? How? Not specified. Then don't pay any attention. If anyone has a charge to make, let him make it in writing. If it is justified, then the authority can take action against me. If it is not justified, I'll sue for defamation and libel. Bert, you can't sue these boys. They have money and power. Even the ministry is afraid of them. You'll be fired if you try. No, I cannot be fired without a hearing before the Ontario Civil Service Commission, and I can make an appeal to the civil courts of Ontario. I'm a free citizen, and the only power I recognize is that of the Crown, which represents the people of Ontario and established law. I'm not going to be intimidated by some fat ass on Bar Bay Street who entertains the minister to cocktails at the Albion Club. Albert was raging now and warming up to his subject. Bert, calm down. Forget you've got red hair and 6 feet of bad temper. Remember you've a wife and kids to feed. There's not an ounce of truth to this man's allegations. In my capacity as an officer of the authority, I have no way interfered with any private commercial enterprise, much as I'd like to sometimes. I've carried out the direction of the authority in every case. When surveying land, I have always had the owner's permission, and glad permission, since I've known most of the farmers since I was at school. They know I'm looking out for their best interests. Bert, they're beginning to get to know your name at Queen's Park since the grass sod incident. They'll blacklist you, and next thing you'll be out on your ear. Who are they? These people who can act outside the law against a public employee. The way you talk, I begin to think things Morty brings out in the legislature. Bert shouted, for Christ's sake, don't get Morty in on this. I've no intention of doing so, but the last time they threatened me from Queen's Park, the authority backed me up to a man. Imagine those city idiots in Toronto demanding sod at Lord knows how much a foot for the road new outside pond in Warkworth, when $25 worth of grass seed and God's sun and rain could do the trick. Who's on the side of the Ontario taxpayer anyway? Bert, don't get political. That's out for civil servants. Anyway, what have you been doing to get that old bugger from now till us upset? Nothing you can think of? Unless it was that creep from your own Ontario yesterday. Who was that? Fat Slicker came wanting to buy some land. Turfed him out. Hit him? No, of course not. Just gave him a warning and pointed to the manure heap. Why, you sore at him. Do you know the outfit? They're buying up usable farmland and cutting it up in little chunks for us city folks to buy. Why, they're within the law. No, sure that they are. Of course, a lot of people in the township like the thought of more people buying in their stores and paying taxes, but nobody says much about sewage or roads or the garbage left at the side of the road. And what can you do with these little 2-acre lots all over the place? You can't farm them productively. Not so that land isn't being farmed productively anyway. No, but there are two sides to that. For real farming, what is needed is big acreage now, not splitting the countryside. No one says you can't sell the farm. The land's too good. The owner has an absolute right to do what he likes. The other thing is you can't have decent reforestation projects with all these little allotments. Burned property is the basis of our law, a lot of our law, but the Crown has an absolute right to control property if it wishes to, and in that there is some hope of enforcing sensible land in Ontario. Most of the time, Queen's Park hasn't the guts to use its power. Look at the Pickering Airport. Bert, you're being political again. Anyway, you kicked out the O man in your capacity as a private citizen. Yes, without violence or assault. The skunk threatened he'd get at me through this office anyway. Tell you what, do me a favor. What? You had a phone call from the ministry? You must have, yeah. Write a letter about the telephone call. Say that the discipline of employees in the authority must go directly to the authority and not your office. Ask them, no, till us. Write complaints directly and specify what happened. I guarantee they'll never write another letter. Okay, Bert, well, take my advice. They'll find ways to get you. These are big boys with big money, and they won't take interference. They have long arms. I'm sure they do, said Albert, getting up, his good humor restored. And I too have deep roots in my land, and the land is very dark in the countryside at night, even in the full of the moon. With these enigmatic words, Albert strode out and back to his desk. He found it hard to settle to the problems of Hartford Pond. Before him were the multicolored maps of the regional study brought out by the provincial government a few years before. It was clear enough that the area southeast of Rice Lake and north of Brighton was intended to remain primarily in existing agricultural and conservational use, with some development of recreational facilities. But a later study showed that Coburg and Port Hope were to become one large urban centre. Then the Northumberland hills would be under pressure to be suburban. Already cedars were dying close to the provincial and county roads because of the automobile emissions. Soon the pollution would spread. The county had changed in fundamental ways since the first Scace had cleared the land for farming on the heights above Warkworth over 100 years before. The township population had been cut in half, and was only beginning to increase again because of the prison guards and their families, and the ex-urbanites, who increasing numbers were buying farms and settling into their variety of country life. Most of his schoolmates had moved away to live in town or Toronto. Of those who remained to farm the land they had inherited, almost all who stayed on the family farm had full or part-time work, driving to the township or the lumber company, picking up milk for the cheese factory, or hiring themselves and their equipment out for piece farming as they were needed by other part-time farmers. A sturdy few with enough acreage and equipment could make a living, and a life worth living on land alone. On these, several were brave immigrants from Holland or Eastern Europe. What would be the effect of the Triple O and such ventures on the land he loved? He regarded most city folk as ruthless and having more money than sense. But the local folk were not always careful of their heritage. Living with it year in, year out, they often lost sight of its beauty and its value. They would throw out priceless family tools and furniture for some flashy item from the chain store or the made-order catalogue, and they preferred the slick Don Mills suburban architecture to the solid lines with gingerbread woodwork and Victorian brick and frame houses. He was more appreciative of the countryside because he had spent some time being educated in the city and knew its decline, its dense foul air, its callous pushing crowds. Out here he could breathe, and on the coldest day of the winter, after spending the day over his desk in the county office, could hardly bring himself to go indoors when he reached the farm. What kind of countryside would be left for his children? Even now, though they did do a lot of farm work both for him and for his neighbours, the boys had in him, their father, an example which led away from the farm, if not from the countryside altogether. Would the hills and fields he loved to be jam-packed by little bungalows side by side? Already the rural kids roared around on scooters in the summertime and snowmobiles in the winter, and they threw as many beer bottles out of travelling cars as city folk. With his precious unploughed and ungravelled lanes, and his overgrown road allowances, special favourites when he had time to go for walks, be coated with asphalt and stink with fumes. He didn't know the answer. His job as a conservationist in the public employ allowed him to keep some streams running and some slopes forested, but no one was officially in charge of conserving good values, the sense of beauty, neighbourliness, and plain truth among folk. Gloomily, he settled to the task at hand. This is the end of Chapter 7 of Drumlin Fever.